Welcome to this Saturday travel and history tip, and we will be going to a place which is part of the story of Lewis and Clark, two of my favorite characters from American history. I think we've probably been to more Lewis and Clark sites than any other targeted sites in our travels. The Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail extends from Wood River, also known as Camp Wood, in western Illinois to the Pacific coast of Oregon and documents the Army Corps of Discovery's venue as initiated by Thomas Jefferson. Specifically following the Missouri River across North Dakota, the famous trail leads travelers to many great attractions, including the previous entry, which was the Fort Union Trading Post that we did last Saturday. In Washburn, the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center lies on the historic trail off U.S. Highway 83. A great place to go is the Fort Mandan Historical Site, which presents a replica fort filled with informative displays. The original fort location is likely under the Missouri River. The Corps experienced frigid temperatures plunging to 45 degrees below zero, along with many days when the thermometer only read zero at the Cottonwood Winter Camp. Models of the two mindful leaders in full military uniform are part of the fort's fabulous decor. There is no way on Saturday Travel and History Tips I can give credit to Lewis and Clark, but we'll try a little bit with this stop at Fort Mandan. Fort Mandan from 1804 to 1805 was the winter quarters of Lewis and Clark expedition. Also was the birthplace of the son born to Sacajawea. Her name is spelled all kinds of different ways. Many of you know her as Sacajawea. And her first French husband, Charbonneau, an interpreter for the explorers. The Bird Woman, which Sacajawea was called, helped guide Lewis and Clark to their destination on the Pacific coast. I've been corrected many times on this. I think it's just part of folklore to make her a little bit more important than she was. Two things that we do know that she did was that when they did encounter Indian tribes, she was able to help diffuse any situations because there was a woman along, and at one point she found her brother. But she was not the guide. She was more likely just Charbonneau's wife. This replica of Fort Mandan was erected and dedicated in 1972. The original site, 10 miles west upriver, is now in the river channel. Named for the nearby Indians, Fort Mandan was winter quarters for the Lewis and Clark expedition. Sited by Captain Clark on November 2, 1804, the fort was built in a triangular shape with cottonwood logs cut in the vicinity. The walls were chinked with mud. Huts housing men and supplies formed two sides, and the third was blockaded by amazing long pickets. The men occupied their unfurnished buildings on November 16, and the two captains moved into theirs 4 days later. To this fort came many visitors, among them Toussaint Charbonneau and Sacajawea. The captains passed the winter by learning as much as possible about the Missouri River tribes and the country that lay before them. Tools and equipment were mended for the Mandans in exchange for foodstuffs. On April 7, 1805, the keelboat and 11 men were sent downriver under the command of Corporal Richard Worthington. That same day, the remainder of the party, the two captains and 31 others, embarked upriver in 6 small canoes and 2 large pirogues. In one of the buildings, they had this chart of the Fort Mandan weather. It was of dates in 1804 and 1805, 1904 and 1905, the Centennial Celebration, in 2004 and 2005, the Bicentennial Celebration. The low temperature was in January of 1936, a negative 60 below. The highest recorded temperature was 121 in July of 1936. Privates John Shields, William Bratton, and Alexander Willard manned the blacksmith shop at Fort Mandan. These men provided repair work to native tools, such as sharpening iron hoes and knives and fixing trade kettles. The Mandan and Hadassah who watched them must have admired the men who worked metal into tools, utensils, and weapons. A considerable amount of corn was exchanged for the two types of weapons, the Missouri war hatchet and another called a battle axe. A burned-out sheet iron stove provided 4-inch square pieces of iron. The natives formed into arrowhead points or manufactured into instruments for scraping and dressing hides. For each square of iron, the blacksmiths obtained 7 to 8 gallons of corn. In addition to corn, buffalo meat, robes, beans, squash, sunflowers, and wild berries were exchanged for the blacksmith's labors. The blacksmiths have proved a happy resource to us in our present situation, as I believe it would have been difficult to have devised any other method to have procured corn from the natives. Meriwether Lewis, February 6, 1805. And then there is Seaman. While preparing for the expedition to the Pacific, Meriwether Lewis visited Philadelphia for instructions in natural sciences, astronomical navigation, and field medicine. It is believed that it was during this period that Lewis purchased Seaman, his dog of the Newfoundland breed, for $20. Although Lewis left unsaid his reason for selecting a Newfoundland, he may have been impressed with the breed's size, strength, and swimming abilities, and its reputation for having a keen sense of judgment. And this entire sign has historical comments about Seaman. It is unclear whether Seaman traveled the last leg of the journey down the Missouri River to St. Louis. No post-expedition documentation has been found linking a Newfoundland dog to the exploring enterprise. However, with the strong bond that seemed to have developed between Seaman and his master, many historians believe that if the dog had not survived the trip, Lewis would certainly have noted it in his journals. This is the part I liked. Well, it's kind of sad, but here we go. Recent evidence uncovered by historians suggests that Seaman lived out his final days at the grave of Captain Meriwether Lewis, who died at Grinder's Inn on the Natchez Trace en route to Washington, D.C. Ever faithful to the master who took him in on an American epic adventure, Seaman was with him to the end. Sorry guys, it just about makes me cry. We have been to Meriwether Lewis's grave. The circumstances around his death are so sketchy, tragic, and mysterious, but I was so grateful that we were able to go to this portion of the Natchez Trace and go to Meriwether Lewis's grave. We did drive on over to the site of Fort Clark, and as you can see, there isn't anything except for a stone building. On this site are the remains of a large earth lodge village originally settled by the Mandan Indians circa 1822 and trading forts Clark and Primeau. Previous to the establishment of Fort Clark, the unmanned post was built in the area by James Kipp and Mr. Tilton for the Columbia Fur Company circa 1822 to 1823, but this post was abandoned shortly thereafter as a result of pressure by the Araucarians. The Mandan village was a center of activity and was visited frequently by neighboring tribes, early white explorers and adventurers. In 1837, smallpox was introduced by the steamboat St. Peter's. The catastrophic epidemic nearly annihilated the Mandan tribe and forced the survivors to flee the village to escape the disease. The abandoned village was occupied by the Araucarians in 1838. A second trading post, Fort Primeau, was established circa 1848, about 300 yards from Fort Clark, to compete for the Indian trade. Both posts were abandoned prior to 1861 when the Araucarians left to join the Mandan and Hadassah at Like-a-Fishhook village. And yes, we did sign the guest book at the stone shelter. Home on the range. No other animal symbolizes the West as dramatically as the American bison, the largest land animal in North America. Bison once numbered in excess of 30 million. Lewis and Clark observed the bison soon after the onset of their journey and frequently wrote about the vast numbers inhabiting the country they passed through. The bison nourished the men, and at times they consumed as much as 7 pounds of meat each day. Today, bison number about 350,000 and can be found across the country. Many bison roam our national parks. I can verify that. However, most are privately owned. Some American Indian tribes are bringing bison herds back to their reservations. I walked out on the high land and observed great numbers of buffaloes. I counted in view at one time 52 gangs. William Clark, October 19th, 1804. It's all a part of American history. Learn it. Love it. Appreciate it. Don't let them steal our history. Share our American history. And next Saturday, we're moving on to the state of Kansas, and our first stop will be Fort Larned. It's on the Santa Fe Trail. How exciting. Can't wait to tell you all about it. Hope you watch the Saturday Travel and History Tips. And if you appreciate our content, tell others and repost on your social platforms. Thank you.